Okay, everybody, welcome. This is the Otherppl podcast. I'm Brad Listi, and I'm in Los Angeles. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and you can follow me on social media, Bluesky and Instagram. I also do a Substack newsletter, bradlisti.substack.com, so check that out if you want to. I have a great episode for you today. My guest is Jonathan Evison. He has a new novel out called The Heart of Winter, and it is available from Dutton. Jonathan Evison was my guest in the very first episode of this show many years ago. I've known Johnny for a long time, and he's a superb writer. And this new novel of his, The Heart of Winter, it's a tearjerker. It's a moving story about a 70-year marriage, and it is just beautifully rendered. You read it, and you feel like you know these people. So, a great conversation with Jonathan Evison coming up. He's always fun to talk with. If you've never heard him before, you're in for a treat. Today's episode is brought to you by Mulholland Books, publisher of the novel Buzzkill by J. Robert Lennon. Buzzkill is the official May pick of the Otherppl book club. That is my book club. If you want to sign up for my book club, you can do that over at otherppl.com. Buzzkill is a book about private investigators, some sisters named Jane and Lila Poole. And they have an Aunt Ruth, but Aunt Ruth committed suicide more than a decade ago. But then Jane and Lila find out that Aunt Ruth's suicide might not have been what it seemed. Buzzkill is a terrific novel. J. Robert Lennon is at the height of his powers. He's at the height of his powers. That feels like something that would have been said in like The Big Lebowski. He's at the height of his powers, dude. I don't mean to be that guy who's like making like Big Lebowski references, but it just occurred to me, like Steve Buscemi, like he's at the height of his powers, dude. Can you see it? Can you imagine it? So one more time, it's called Buzzkill, the new novel by J. Robert Lennon, the official May pick of the Otherppl book club, available now wherever books are sold from Mulholland Books. I'm at the height of my powers as a podcaster, by the way. So I want to tell you before we get started, or I want to issue a reminder. I keep doing this. I have a company that I'm building. It's in the works, and it's going to launch later this year, and it's called Deep Dive. Jonathan Evison, incidentally, is a featured instructor in my first course, which is called How to Write a Novel. Deep Dive is a company that makes long-form educational audio. So, you've heard of audio courses before. You've heard of like online courses and all that kind of stuff. But Deep Dive makes big audio courses. How to Write a Novel will feature more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with dozens of today's leading writers, including Johnny Evison, Emily St. John Mandel, Purchista Hakpur, Vivi Ganeshananthan, Madeline Lucas, Steve Almond, Matt Bell, Matthew Salisis, Vauhini Vara, and so on and so forth. So it takes like a maximalist approach, and I'm working to create a course about how to write a novel that you can listen to over the course of like, say, a year while you work on a draft. That's one way of doing it. Or you could just binge it all in a week and go crazy. It's up to you. But it's going to be like a writing course that you've never quite seen before. And it's in the works. It's going to launch later this year. You can sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter over at www.deepdive.audio so you can stay tuned to all the latest. And of course, I will let you know about developments as they unfold here on the Otherppl show. So my guest, once again, is Jonathan Evison. His new novel is called The Heart of Winter, and it is available right now from Dutton. Jonathan Evison is the best-selling author of many novels, including Again and Again, Small World, All About Lulu, West of here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, Lawn Boy, and Legends of the North Cascades. He lives up there in Washington State, and he also hosts a podcast called A Fresh Face in Hell. I am always happy to welcome Jonathan Evison back onto the Otherppl show, and I am very pleased to get to share our conversation with all of you right now. So here we go with Jonathan Evison.
I am on Bainbridge Island versus the cabin, which is, I would love to record all this. I would love to never leave the cabin up in the mountains. I love it, but no internet there. I mean, I have a little jetpack, so anytime I record anything like this, I have to be here. My 90-year-old mother is in the next room. I take care of her. She lives with us. She knows I'm recording, but should she pop in, you'll see her.
We'll bring her in.
So yeah, I'm actually in the bedroom I grew up in. So this is the house I grew up in. So this is, and that's John Fante behind me.
Oh yeah, look at that
painting. And yeah, so and this is where the book takes place. This is kind of basically where we live here on the sort of north end of the island. Is sort of where I fictionally set their farm. Abe and Ruth's farm is just right around where we are, which used to be called Route 8 when I was a kid, because it was a lot more rural.
How big is Bainbridge Island? Like how long does it take to drive around the island?
I think roughly it's about the size of Manhattan, a little wider in points than Manhattan, but maybe not quite as long. I don't know. It's about the size of Manhattan, but instead of being 8 million people, there's like 15,000, which is way more. It's twice what I was when I was a kid. Like, it feels crowded to me now. It's feeling more like a bedroom community. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to, like a Lawn Boy, I took a very unsentimental, kind of a chainsaw to the place, because it was a class narrative, and growing up poor in a sort of wealthier place, I was sort of critical of the nouveau riche and sort of the new island. But like, this book more harkens back to the island I grew up on, which was much more romantic, ideal place. I mean, like, when people moved here in the 60s and the 70s, they moved here for what I call the quaint inconveniences of island life. They moved here because they wanted to drive 20 minutes round trip to the store, because they wanted to have to take a ferry to go to the city. And so it kind of drew a different sort of demo. Now it's kind of a bedroom community, and people like it because there's low crime, and it's.
Well, the Bainbridge Island as depicted in your book, I mean, the span of time is pretty large, but it's like the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, I think they move here in, late 50s all the way to the present day. So I think there's about, it's pretty much like 60 plus years.
Well, it seems idyllic on the page in so many ways. Just the way that there's like a sense of community and cohesion, and people know one another, and there's like parades and you know what I'm saying? Like, and then like,
and it's still there. I have to look, the vestiges of that are still here, on the 4th of July and things like that. And like, if you shop at the old store, the Town and Country, which is locally owned by, I think is it the Cicadas or the Nakatas? If you shop there, you tend to run into more of the old Islander people, or if you go to Safeway, you're going to run into people you don't know as much. So that still exists, but it's, I'll be honest, it's a little disillusioning at times. Now it feels kind of like the Cape Cod of the West. It's a lot, towns got a little less of that small town charm. It's a little more gentrified. It's a little more like, going to Telluride at this point than it is what it used to be, which was like Mayberry, USA,
Yeah, it was it's like the kind of American dreamy. It was that kind of thing.
I feel very lucky to have grown up here. It was that way. And, even though we didn't have money, there was just no lack of resources. My neighbors were, the Marshalls kind of saved my life. Like, when we moved in here, we were like broken family. I was like at-risk kid. My dad was gone. My sister was dead, but like, he was the president of the Little League. And she was like, Gail Marshall was like she was like the proto soccer mom. She had the Gail M vanity plate, and she always had a van full of little leaguers. She was driving around to a pool, I really did have a pretty idyllic childhood here, because you could go out in the woods and make Bigfoot tracks. I had all the acres were at least a lot. All the lots were at least an acre. So, I mean, we had our own baseball field, our own football field right out here. We had a ton of kids in the neighborhood. I mean, some days in our neighborhood, there'd be 2 different football games going. The Hayashitas would be playing Itza. I never liked those little rubbery Itza footballs. And they played touch or flag. And we would be playing tackle down here. We had the full on, like we go to Goodwill and get the helmets and the pads. And we even had a field goal post, made a giant PVC field goal post.
So just like all American childhood.
It was, man. And I was a total Tom Sawyer too. Like I would have like kids, cause I was, single working mom. I could have any sugar cereal I wanted, but I didn't really give a rat's ass. But I would get actually my podcast producer, Jason, I would have him come over because his parents wouldn't let him have sugar cereal. I would just sit there and watch him rake the leaves and shit like that for just the promise of as many Cocoa Krispies as he could eat. And he would do all my chores.
Well, you're covering this huge span of time and you're tracking the lives of an entire family and you're following a marriage essentially from its beginning point to at least close to its end, I guess. And that's a big lift. And yet you sort of make it feel effortless on the page. There's a beautiful clarity to your writing and a kind of seamlessness to all the time transitions in the book. I was reading a review, and this was a while ago. I want to say somebody compared you to like a master carpenter, but there is some of that. Like you've really gotten skilled at the carpentry of novel making, of assembling a story, especially like a complex story and a story that spans a huge swath of time and involves lots of different characters. That's kind of one of your specialties.
Yeah, structure you get better at it. Look, I've written 23 novels, so structure I get better at. I feel like I'm getting better in general every time out. I sometimes think, well, there's probably some things I've lost. If I go to way back to like All About Lulu or West of Here, you go back a couple decades and maybe I've lost the sort of on high hyperbolic quality to some of my prose at times, or, certain voice things that are now sort of a little more, I think, tempered by time. But in terms of like storytelling and being in control of the craft and the characters and not writing myself into corners and knowing when to not hurry and knowing when to trust the process, I'm getting more and more efficient. I mean, I think better, but also just more efficient. Like I just started a book like 2 weeks ago, dude, and I've got like 40 pages and it's solid, I mean, because I've learned what my strengths are. I'm always kind of trying to, develop a few new tools, get myself out of my comfort zone. But like a lot of it is just knowing how to develop characters and trusting that within that character, the arc is built in, I just have to make these characters and then they have to make decisions, usually bad ones. And that complicates their journey and they have to sort of deal with the fallout of that. And that's dramatic structure, I can remember a time getting lost, what happens next? I'm behind the 8 ball here. Something's got to happen, but that's the way I thought of it. Like it's not that something's got to happen. It's just that the character needs to exercise some agency. The character has to be presented with something and make some kind of decision about how to proceed. And so once I realized that, it's like, I don't know. It just becomes, I don't want to just getting out of my own way is easier. I'm not just sitting there like, like with the whole Western literary canon, looking over my shoulder and like building a story one sentence at a time. That's not how it works for me. It usually flows pretty, and, you could say my prose are anodyne. I don't think I get a lot of credit as a prose stylist, but like whatever. I mean, they're there to serve I want my prose to be invisible, quite frankly, until I need them not to be, I mean, it helps to be, for emotional evocation and things like that. It helps the language is there to help you. But if you're doing it all the time while somebody's turning on a lamp or going to sleep or reading a book, I mean, you sort of lose the dynamic.
So this is a story about Abe and Ruth Winter, their marriage, their family. It's a long marriage. It's a long life. And it's their story. Can you talk about how you got started with this? Like what the point of Genesis was? Yeah,
well, it's a very personal story. 2 years ago, my mother, who we lived together in the house I grew up in half the time when we're here, she basically was diagnosed with the exact cancer Ruth had. It started with a toothache. She had Ruth's journey, but she has no Abe. She had me. So I was there through the diagnosis, through the diet, all the diet to prepare her for the surgery, through the aftercare, through sleeping in a bed with her so I could help her up, go to the bathroom at night, and through, reading to her at her bed in the aftercare facility every day. And as I was there for her, I felt bad that she didn't have her chosen partner there, her forever partner, because my mom was, she married two bums, you know what I mean? So I wanted to, really what I said is I want to write you the love story you deserve. So that's where you're supposed to say,
Well, yeah, but I mean,
yeah, no, but I mean, that was the genesis. I was like, I'm instead of me being here, I want it to be Abe. And no, Ruth is not my mom. And I mean, I just wanted to give her I wanted to give her a story where love won, that it was in for the long haul. And as you know, having read it, it's not a boy meets girl, up, easy love story. It's not a romance. I mean, Ruth and Abe's marriage is about as grueling and I mean, every obstacle, every pitfall a marriage could have, from infidelity to the death of a child. I mean, so much of marriage is surviving adversity. You know it. I mean, as my friend, I know you've had adversity in your family life, and I so that to me is the true love story of it. It's not romantic, but my mom loved it, and so like when. This is typical my mom. When she said, I love it. I think it's my second favorite book of yours. Never the first. Like, that's my mom, though. Like, I remember I told her I got my first job in radio, and she's like, are you sure your voice is deep enough? And then, like, I got my first book advance, and she's like, is that all? And so, like, I mean, I'll take it. It's her second favorite book. But
wait, what's the first favorite?
I think her favorite is West of Here, which surprises me. That's a lot of people's favorite, but it's not most people's favorite, just because it's such a big ask of the reader. I mean, there's 64 limited points of view or something like that. I mean, it's a big ask. So like, I'd say it's my least broadly relatable book, but the people that love it kind of thing.
Wow. Okay. And so you start with that fuel, and that makes a certain sense to me, because I think we have to have something driving us if we're going to finish a novel, and it's got to be something that cuts deep. And writing a book like this for your mom, especially in the wake of her going through a serious health situation, there's a certain logic to that. And you talked a bit ago about how it usually flows pretty quickly for you when you sit down to draft, like once you kind of have an idea. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Because again, this is an ambitious novel. You're tracking an entire family and a couple over the course of their entire lives. So where do you even begin? And do you have an outline, or do you just kind of jump in and figure it out?
I don't have an outline. Sometimes I kind of outline as I go along. I would liken that to more of a scaffolding sort of situation. But no, I mean, the first thing I knew, I always know when I start a story that I'm thinking of the reader here. You got to make a promise. You got to make a big promise, or some promises to the reader. And in the case of this, I wanted to make a promise and immediately subvert it, so that I could immediately, by chapter 2, kick it into another gear. And without spoiling it, you understand the expectation, right? Abe wakes up. It's his, 90th birthday. He thinks it's his last birthday. He's preparing for it to be his last birthday. And then, well, I guess that's not a spoiler. We know Ruth gets cancer. So suddenly the roles are reversed. This book I wrote exactly as it stands. Like I switched points of view back and forth, because that was the natural way to talk about marriage. His point of view, her point of view, back and forth. And then I knew that I wanted to go sort of linearly through the marriage to show the development. So I would do his point of view, her point of view, his point of view, her point of view. But then from like, I think 1952, when they meet in college on that disastrous blind date. And then usually there's just like 1 or 2 chapters per decade. And in those chapters, there's a little bit of a background. I mean, I'm not trying to be Forrest Gump, but like, you have to feel the times, because that's kind of the subtext to this book too, is it's sort of about the culture wars too, because these are two, ideologically, politically opposed people, Ruth being sort of a progressive, bohemian type, and Ray being, Abe being a like an Eisenhower Republican. So these things are always at odds in their marriage. They're not always coming from the same place. And so we sort of see, and again, I'm not like browbeating anybody with this, but like when you stop to think about it, there's been, 17 presidential administrations where they didn't see eye to eye on, up until the present one, where Ray, like any Eisenhower Republican, was like, what the fuck happened to my party? So I pretty much, the sequencing of the chapters, everything pretty much in the first draft was exactly what it was, except for one chapter. And that's what I do in my later drafts when I'm rewriting, is I'm usually I'm obsessive. So like, I'm not somebody who can just like, well, I'll take care of that in the next draft. It's got to be pretty fucking perfect for me to like want to move on, or it'll just be bugging me. And if I find opportunities, I have to stop and reverse engineer that possibility back into the book. Otherwise, I know I'll miss more opportunities. So by the time I actually get to the end of a first draft, it's really close. I mean, it's really, I still go over it 4 or 5 times, but usually when I'm going over it, then I'm looking for opportunities, Easter eggs, connective tissue, making connections that will be aha moments for the reader that are sort of implicit there, but I can kind of bring them out a little bit and put a finer point on them. And so there was one chapter I felt that was missing that I owed to Ruth, and that was the Paris chapter, which has one of my favorite moments in the book too, which was, it served Ruth because she deserved that, because she had given up on these dreams that she had had for so long. But I also needed it to redeem Abe, because there's that moment when he wakes up grumpy and she's not in the hotel, and he's going to give her a piece of his mind. What are you doing? Leave me in the hotel. And then he finds her there with her journal and her, and sees her, and he's like, oh my God, he just sees her glowing, and he turns around, which is the right decision. So Abe finally redeems himself in that chapter. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for in future chapters, is like, I've got the arc usually comes out, even with something like Small World. Like, I mean, I don't know, in some ways, the more complex the novel is, the easier it is for me to write, because then I could just get the fuck out of my own way. That's a big part of it. You've been there, just getting out of your own way. I mean, I try to, at my best, I think this is all an exercise in imagination. I'm bringing, and so something like Small World, or even this book, has so little of me in it that it's freeing. I mean, it's already just the fact that it has none of me in it that's half the work right there. I can get out of my own way. I can give the thing itself to the characters and let them navigate it. And I'm just kind of, chronicling it.
It's an important point to make, though, that if you're struggling with plot, you should focus on character. If you don't have character figured out, or you don't have character primary, it's probably going to be difficult for you to find your way to the plot, right?
Yeah. I mean, a problem with a lot of people, they mistake characterization for character. You know what I mean? Collections. These are the person's quirk. This is how they dress. He's got these are his tics and idiosyncrasies. But like, really, characters just decisions. And so what needs to inform those decisions is that the character has to want something, even if they don't know what it is, even if they're just suffering from some vague ennui, but they know there's more, even if they want that elusive more, whatever it is, they got to have something they're going after, I mean, like, when you get it down to the formula, it's like, okay, well, this is an inner city chess team and they're trying to get to the championship. So we know what they want, right? It's easy to follow. That's not always so easy when we're talking about, usually it's just, my characters try, so I resent it when I remember Janet Maslin once said in the New York Times, she said I had a way with losers. And I was like, God, I mean, she meant it as a compliment, but I was like, God, my characters are not losers. To me, a loser isn't trying. My characters are always trying. They're usually failing, falling flat on their face. They're making a mess of it, but they're trying. And to me, that, that's what drives the characters. They're trying to inch their way towards self-improvement. And they don't always know how to do that. But outside forces in their life present them with opportunities or obstacles. Obstacles and opportunities are the same thing, right? I'm not going to go Tony Robbins on you here, but obstacle is an opportunity. And so they have to make a decision and they react. Characters are largely reactive. But in the end, if you're going to redeem them, you redeem them by having them be true to themselves.
Well, it's interesting to me that you're writing this book for your mom, and you're kind of giving her the love story that she didn't get to have. And you chose for Ruth's partner, like a bow tie wearing Republican, who's a little bit stodgy, like a good guy, but like, she's like the Birkenstock wearing, free spirited poet. And I'm interested in hearing you talk about that decision. It's kind of like an opposites attract love story.
It is. And at the same time, if you look at the silent generation, I mean, I look at so many marriages of my mom's generation. So the silent generation is just kind of previous to the what they call the greatest generation. There was a lot of marriages where I felt like there was some ideological disconnect. I mean, and generally, I would say more often than not, a husband was more conservative, and the wife maybe was a little more liberal. It just kind of comes with the job description. Like, Abe and Republicans, these Eisenhower Republicans deal in kind of more of a world of absolutes, right? Job, country, things are much more simple. But when you're trying to raise 3 kids by yourself and your husband's basically life is just so much more complex, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of marriages. Plus, it makes it interesting because there's conflict, and it allowed me to sort of, subtextually kind of touch on the culture wars and say, hey, look, if these people can find common ground for 70 years, maybe it's time for us to start looking, and not, and I think that's part of success in a marriage. Is like, I mean, when you look at the culture wars, really what the problem is that the conversation culturally and the media conversation about the divisiveness in this country is always about the fringes. It's about the fringe left as far as we can go with identity politics, or it's about, guns and Jesus over on this side. But really, most of us dwell somewhere closer to the center, right? But that's not where the cultural conversation or the dialogue is driven. And I think that, when you grew up, I'm sure you remember, like in the 70s and 80s, I didn't know if my neighbors were Republicans or Democrats. I mean, looking back, I could kind of make that judgment now and say, I bet they were probably Republican, but you didn't know because you had an Eisenhower Republican and you had a Jimmy Carter Democrat. If we were still there, I mean, people wouldn't be going on these political screeds. Our feeds wouldn't be full of political stuff because we'd be so much closer together. And I honestly think we are a little bit closer together if you just take out the fringes.
I think that your book, there's something elegiac about it, at least for me as a reader, like thinking about a time and a generation where those kinds of relationships were more possible and people could sort of coexist, even intimately, with somebody who didn't agree with them on everything and might even disagree with them on a lot of important issues. And yet their love for each other and whatever bound Abe and Ruth together transcended whatever differences they might have had. And it feels like that's vanishingly rare.
Yeah. And sometimes it isn't about love. I mean, it's about shared responsibilities of having children and a farm and like, you know what I mean? It's like, there's this not a idyllic marriage in so many ways. So many marriages wouldn't have survived it, but that ethos, it's almost sort of a bootstrapper take on marriage. I mean, it just takes a lot of work. And I think we, as culture accelerates, as we're constantly bombarded by more and more stimulus, I think we get further and further from these like bedrock values of like working through something and sticking together. I mean, people can't even stick on a social network. They're ready to, first sign of trouble, they're ready to just bail. I'm going to go over to Bluesky now. I think as a culture, we just have lost that sort of, and I think it's because life is a little easier now. I mean, you lived through the Depression and you are more likely to see the value of gritting it out,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like social media, I feel like online life has done more to damage like the social cohesion and like basic social contracts than just about anything.
I do. And yet I think it's such a great thing in the way too. Like for me, it's been nothing but a positive force in my life. But generally speaking, I would agree with you. I would be so sad if my Facebook just disappeared one day because it's like, fuck, where am I ever going to get all these guys I played Little League with? People I worked with at every damn cafe job, bar job, everybody I was ever in a band with, all my boxing fans from my boxing, all these, where else am I going to have the opportunity to get all these people together? In that respect, it's sort of utopian. It's fucking great. I've found all of my tribes and they're all in one place. But yeah, I think probably for most people, it does more damage than good. I just scroll past the, I stay informed, you know what I mean? And I keep my enemies close too. I mean, there's guys I went to high school with that are pretty Trumpy. I don't just automatically block them. I don't really engage with them, but I kind of like sort of curious, like, what are they thinking, you know? So I want to, it offers me a purview into the culture that I wouldn't necessarily get if I was just living in an echo chamber. You know, if I just went over to Bluesky, it's like, oh, that's all great. Let's infight about Chuck Schumer now. And, I think it's important to hear as many to see, I mean, that's our job, right? As writers, we're supposed to report on the culture. We're supposed to report on the human condition and being human in this time, in this place, and in this moment. And if you're putting your blinders on or living in any kind of echo chamber, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're not even qualified. You know what I mean? You're writing polemical stuff as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you are dealing with a family and a marriage that, as you've alluded to, wasn't perfect. I don't think any long marriage is going to have its difficult moments, and it's just the nature of it. I loved how realistic it seemed. Like, I believed that these people were married. I believed that their relationship was real precisely because, Ruth, like, what was the guy's name? Can I spoil something and say she made out with a guy at one point during the marriage?
Oh yeah. Leonard Haruto.
Yeah. Leonard Haruto. And then, there are other moments that I loved. I don't want to spoil because I want people to be able to enjoy, but like they go through that. They go through the loss of a child, which is like maybe the most difficult thing that a married couple could possibly have to endure.
My parents' marriage didn't survive it. So that's part of like what I meant by writing my mom the love story. When my sister died in a freak accident the weekend of her 16th birthday, that was the end of our family life. We went straight from the 50s to the late 70s, like overnight. We went from like the Cleavers to Kramer versus Kramer. Just with one act. And so that was one thing. In the book, Karen dies differently, but that's what I meant about giving my mom a love story she deserves. Like, she should have had a husband that would have stuck through that loss, So there are certain things that are sort of coded, like winking a nod to my mom there.
Loss like that within a family. I got to witness that sort of thing. Or I had to witness, it wasn't it obviously wasn't great, but when I was growing up, I had friends who, a parent died, a sibling died. I saw that sort of stuff and in multiple families. And it was interesting to see how certain families kind of came together in new and important ways in the aftermath, but other families, it was chaos. I don't know exactly why,
Blame. I would say blame. What happens is, if you outlive a child, that's what did my parents in, was a blame. My sister, so she died in this accident. She was on a road trip on her 16th birthday. And, she asked if she could go with her friends on this road trip. And my mom was, she's a good student. She always feeds her pet. She's a really responsible kid. Yeah, let's let her go. And my dad was like, I don't think this is a good deal. My dad was kind of stodgy. He was like, I don't think it's a good deal. These kids are too young. And she went and never came back. And my dad blamed her for that. So, fuck him. What kills me is that, when I was 14, 15 years old, I was in a touring punk band. So, my mom's raising me by herself and I would be gone. She didn't know where I was. I could be in San Francisco. I could be in Portland in a van with guys 6, 7 years older than me. And now I feel so guilty about, she let her daughter go on a road trip and she never came back. And so here I was doing this all the time. And I just, when you're an adolescent, you're just so self-absorbed. It didn't even really occur to me that I should stop at this phone booth. And, this is pre-cell phone and clearly. And so you stop and, let my mom know I'm okay. And so I remember, Abe and Ruth struggle with that in the book with Karen, you know what I mean? Like, they're waiting by the phone for her to, call.
It's hard to imagine. Like, there's so many things about the way that we grew up, because we're about the same age, that I can feel nostalgic for. But now that I'm a parent, the idea of having a kid be out on the loose and there's no cell phones. You just have you have to just wait for a payphone call and hope that you're home. That's crazy.
I know. And here's the toughest part, as you know, as a parent, is that those are some of our greatest memories. We're just I mean, dude, I used to climb fucking cedar trees in the middle of thunderstorms. You know what I mean? I'm lucky I wasn't killed. I used to, walk around the shadiest parts of Oakland with a guy who had a kilo of weed handcuffed to his arm. And just some of the situations I was in, I would cringe to think of my kid in those situations. And so I try not to be a helicopter parent, but that's the thing about parenting. It's so hard. I want my kid to have these experiences, but if he's 16, I'm gonna have to make that decision. When he's 16, he's got his driver's license and says, me and my 3 buddies want to drive to Spokane, and I'm gonna sit down and we're gonna have a talk about, that. But I'm gonna have to let him go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You don't want to overparent or restrict your kid in a way that's going to damage them. And you can't live in fear. You know what I'm saying? You can't let fear be the guiding principle of how you relate to the world or relate to your family or relate to anybody. And there's just inherent risk in being alive as a human. And that gets really hard when you think about your children.
Oh, dude, I was kind of a helicopter. I mean, when they were climbing a tree, I'm down there, under the tree, in case they fall. It's really hard, dude. Being a parent is that's just it. You just worry for them. It's not just the constant headaches and the schedules and them giving you, it's just how much you care for them and worry for them and don't want anything to happen to them.
Yeah.
And if I think my kid is depressed or something, and I go dark, it's just I worry so much.
Well, sure. And I think the basic labor of being a parent is something that you draw really well in this novel. Abe is out there selling insurance and he's good at it and he's built a successful career and that takes up most of his time. And so Ruth is home raising these children and doing a lot of the parenting work. And, that part of being in a marriage is super difficult. Unless you're totally flush, you have a $1 kajillion or something. But if you have to put food on the table and you have to work, there's no way around it. And, I think of 2-parent households where both of the parents are working and they've got kids and, that makes it even more difficult. But I don't know. There's an inherent tension in that. And yet I don't know exactly how to resolve it in my own life or anyone's life. Somebody's got to work and you've got to be out there doing that work. And I guess you can find comfort in it as a parent in terms of having kind of your own autonomy. And maybe that'll, I don't know. I think some parents, some dads, some moms take advantage of that by staying at the office longer than they should or extending.
Well, and that would be Abe and his whole generation. You know what I mean? Abe was not, I'm not going to call him absentee. He was a provider, but he wasn't changing a lot of diapers. I mean, he really wasn't rolling up his sleeves and, he does, to his credit, there's that time early on in their marriage when they're living in Seattle still. And Ruth just needs to go shopping and stuff at a certain time on the weekends. And Abe gets left with the kids and he sees for just an hour and a half at a time what she has to deal with, And I mean, once you deal with it, it's really easy to try to avoid. I don't have time. I just when I work, I have to stay on task. I can't just be sitting around the hot tub or, watching Red Dwarf reruns or something. I mean, it's I don't, but they got to pass in that generation, they got to pass on everything. I mean, you could have a extramarital affair, and it could be your wife's fault, that, what is it? The Jack Jones song, wives must always be lovers too. She's supposed to change diapers, cook, pack lunches, go to the park, do this shit all day and then come home and 10 minutes before he gets home, put some makeup on, put something a little more suggestive on and greet him at the door with his slippers. You know what I mean? It was it's fucking thankless, dude. So I think that, I think it's interesting because there's some, most people like both Abe and Ruth. I'm somebody who reads the good reviews, not because I have thick skin. I just read it because I want to know what the conversation is, And I mean, I just want to know how people feel about the characters. And most people, I would say overwhelmingly like both Abe and Ruth because even though they're very flawed, but some people don't. And I found that it's men who are more critical of Abe and women who are more critical of Ruth, which I thought was interesting. I almost thought it would be the other way around. And I can see why the men are capable, are more, when I think about it, it's like I could see myself being more, I'm so critical of my dad, because I'm like, the longer I'm a dad, the harder I work, the less respect I have for him, because he didn't do any of this shit. So like, I can kind of see how that works, but it did kind of surprise me. Like, you would think it might be the other way around. Like the men would be like more critical of the female character and the female, but it was almost across the board. I mean, like not invariably, but almost, like seriously, like 90% of the time.
And I'm interested to know if, because Ruth is sort of this latent poet. She's got an artistic side that she doesn't ever get to fully realize, because she's kind of sacrificed so much of her time and energy to raising kids and, being in this family. But I'm wondering if your mother is the source of like your writerly tendencies. Like, does your mom have that kind of lean to her?
No, not really. Like my mom, like Ruth, my mom kind of gave up on all that. I mean, when my mom was 17, she wanted to go to art school and be a museum curator. And by the time she was 18, she was pregnant. And then she was just pregnant for the next 10 years. So she never, I came by it by just, I needed an escape. I started writing purely for escapism, because I could surrender myself to this sort of imaginary landscape where I had more control. I got to sort of decide what happened, and I didn't have to deal with, my actual quotidian life. So it is, and it's still that way. That's how I manage my anxiety. I mean, I drive everybody nuts if I, because I'm bipolar too. So I drive everybody nuts if I don't write, I mean, there's a reason I was able to write 7-8 books before anybody published them. And it wasn't just because I was like tenacious, like, oh, we'll get it on number 9. It wasn't that at all. It's just, I have to do it, because that's as close as I can get to like whatever, some sort of yogic state where it's like, the idea of getting outside of yourself. I keep framing it as getting out of your own way. That's what writing does for me. It grounds me. Ironically, it grounds me in the other people's miserable lives, making bad decisions, dealing with a bunch of, but somehow it's still, I don't know, it's a relief for me. And so I have to do it. I mean, if they stop publishing my books tomorrow, I'm sitting on 2.5 books, dude. I write a lot because I need to, I'm not in a hurry, and yeah, I got to keep the lights on, but that's not why I publish a book almost every year. It's just because if I don't do the work, man, I'm going to be IB drug user or yelling at parking meters or something.
Well, it's interesting, like, do you have bipolar 2, do you take medicine, or is it just the writing is the medicine?
The writing is the medicine. I've been self-medicating with alcohol, weed, sex, exercise, all that stuff for, since I was like, 13, 14 years old. And I've always managed it pretty well. I saw a lot of my friends become junkies and die of overdoses and so forth. I've made pretty good decisions about that because I kind of knew what I was up against. I got a tiger by the tail kind of thing. And I also know a lot of people with my sort of hypomania that have gone down the clinical medication route with sometimes disastrous results, like a bad chemical cocktail, like the meds aren't, or more often than not, withdrawal from the medication for whatever reason, because they try to go straight or they want to. So I've always kind of felt like it's a blessing and a curse. I've turned it into mostly a blessing because I use it as a sort of hyper productivity. But like if I don't use it, if I'm not working, it starts to gnaw away at you from the inside, and you start to, I'm afraid if I were to medicate that I would lose the edge. I think I'd probably be happier in certain ways. You know what I mean? I'd probably be chill a little bit more, but also I don't think that I could do what I do.
Yeah, I was
I
going
think
to
it
say,
sort
in a
of
way, it's
depends.
kind of like it's like your superpower almost
I would
in a
say,
weird
yeah,
way.
it's definitely my superpower. And thus far it hasn't, but then I have to be careful, because I also have a liver and, these other considerations. And so, I mean, it's really one of the things that's kept me from becoming a total like dissolute drunk all my life. That and, having kids, my kids are never really around when I drink. I mean, yeah, on the weekends they see me with a beer in my hand, but most of it's at night when I'm working or like when I'm at the cabin. So it's not like, alcoholic dad, like, "Hi, Mom, look, I brought pizza. Get out here. Everybody wake up. Turn it on." Like you hear about those dads, like, "I brought fucking pizza," and they're turning on all the lights. Get out of bed. It's not like that at all. It's more just my thing where it's self-medication.
So wait, when it comes to like a writing day for you, when you have this much energy and you're channeling the way that you are, like, what does it look like? Like, are you able to write in like 14-hour binges or like, what do you?
16 and 8 pretty much. And how that looks is I mean, like, dude, I need to be a creature of habit. It's really hard with the kids. There's so many moving pieces. So my Wednesdays and Thursdays, I try so hard to protect them, but there's always like a school event. I mean, most weeks I don't get to pull it off, but in a perfect world, I drive out to the cabin in an hour and a half early Wednesday morning after I drop the kids up, and I write until like 3 a.m. Now, I'm stopping to make a sandwich. I'll stop to walk the dog for a couple hours in the woods. I'll walk like 6 miles, but even that's cogitating time. That's kind of catching my breath, but also like texting myself so I can hit the ground running again. And then what usually happens is, honestly, like, I write 8 hours in my green chair, and then after the walk, and then I might take a hot tub, and then that's when I maybe have a little tequila and a glass and a beer. And then after that, I retire out to the garage. Different environment. Now I'm a little, I got a little bit of my edge off. And so it's almost like a whole new day. I don't think I could just do 16 hours in a chair, but I can do 8 and 8. And what happens is I think Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober. I'm like the opposite. I'm like, write sober, edit drunk. Cause like, if I get a little booze in me, I'm like a little less sentimental about the prose or a little less precious about it. I mean, my bullshit meter goes down. I'm like, bullshit. Cause sometimes when you're trying to be productive, you're maybe overwriting or you're lingering too long on something. But then, like, when I look at through that lens where I'm just, I guess, a little less attached to it, then I could just, so sometimes that second 8 hours costs me more words than it gains me, but like, it seems to work. I've created a balance.
Wow, that's interesting.
But I'm thinking about it all the rest of the week, right? So it's like being a football player. Like, I know I just want to be game ready when that fucking whistle blows on Sunday. So there's a lot I can do to mentally prepare myself to get in that flow state. And one of those things is take care of every other fucking logistical thing I can in my life so that I'm not micromanaging. I'm on like 7 listservs for my kids' schools and shit. I mean, there's just trying to get as much of that stuff out of the way and just talking to yourself, just like, when that whistle blows, game time. Because you know how it is. It's really easy to just get in front of there, check your Facebook, reach for the lotion. I mean, it's really easy to just distract yourself. But I hit it right away.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You work in an 8-hour stretch, kind of sober, and then you have a few drinks, and then you will edit the day's work. Like, you go back over what
sometimes I'll keep writing. Oh, also, the other thing about hypomania is that I metabolize alcohol like I had this buddy of mine. He's like a 300-pound ice fishing Wisconsinner type of guy, and like, I mean, that guy tries to drink with me in a night, and he's going to end up with his forehead on the table. Nobody can do it. It's because I metabolize this shit like it just doesn't even, It's again, a blessing and a curse. I just, I get my blood tested every year just to check my liver counts too. That would be the, I don't know what I'd do. If they're like, your liver counts are elevated, I'd be like, oh shit.
Yeah. I mean, cause you got to find that balance, but it seems like, you've been productive and you've been like very productive, and you've been focused and prioritized in a way where it all kind of works. And like, that's ultimately what everybody's got to do. Like, right. If you're going to write books, especially consistently, you've got to find a system that works for you one way or another. And that's not just, when you work, but it's like your family situation, which days of the week you're going to work, like what times work best for you or whenever you can do it. I mean, all that kind of stuff you have to sort out. And it feels like you've got a good system in place. You've got this cabin, you live on this island. It's pretty chill. Got a good, good family situation. You got help with the kids. Like, is your mom helping out with the kids? I would guess, like when you're up.
She's kind of old. I mean, she can help in the way that like, if I got to go shopping. I mean, the kids are getting old enough. They're pretty responsible. I don't really need that much help. I mean, Lauren does a lot. I mean, mostly the help is getting them back and forth from school on the 2 days a week I'm not there, and kind of more of that logistical stuff. But I would say as far as managing all this stuff, I'd say I feel really lucky because honest to God, I feel like I was put on this earth to write novels. There's nothing else I do. Like I do this, I do a little podcasting and I do some public speaking, and once in a while I'll teach a workshop or anything. But there's only one thing I do that I felt like I was born to do. And there's only one thing I do where it feels like everything else, time stands still. And I'm like, I'm really have the sense of purpose that I'm doing exactly what I can do. And that's why I'm undaunted by whatever those roadblocks there are. I mean, I'm still finding new ways to fail, dude. I mean, 2 of the last 5 novels I've written, will never see the light of day. And I finished them. And but it's really, and I'll go, this just isn't very good. And then I'll get really depressed for like 6 minutes and then on to the next one because it's really the act. It really is. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I just feel fucking blessed that I found that thing, and it took 20 years for anybody else to find that I could do that thing proficiently enough to make any kind of living. But that was still a secondary, it's just love.
When did you know that you were wired for this? Like, when did you know that writing was your thing?
3rd grade. When I was 8, shortly after my dad relocated us, not long after my sister had died, my dad left my mom with the kids. And I would just felt like my life was falling apart. I was an 8-year-old kid. My life was kind of falling apart around me. And there's a lot of shit I couldn't control. And I had this 3rd grade teacher, and I'd already, I was a September birthday. So I started school when I was a 4-year-old. I was kind of the youngest kid in the kindergarten class, but then they skipped me 2nd grade. And so when they skipped me 2nd grade, then all of a sudden I was 2 years younger than everybody. And so when we moved here in 3rd grade, or my dad moved us here and left us, my mom made the decision, which probably made a writer out of me, that she was just going to have me do the 3rd grade again so that to make it easier for me socially. So I'd go back to being like within the sort of equilibrium. I'd still be one of the youngest kids in class, but there was other kids with September, October birthdays. So she made that decision. But like what happened between the fact that I had already had the curriculum and the fact that like all this stuff was falling apart, all these changes, just relocated, all my friends and family that I was ever near are now gone. I had to, between those 2 things, I was just sort of like, I guess, a little kid in crisis. And so Mrs. Hanford, my teacher, noticed that I like to write, and she saved my ass. She just let me sit in a corner and just write, basically escape all the time. And then if that wasn't enough, she got me involved in something called the Young Authors Conference, where I got to go to it was either Seattle University or Seattle Pacific University somewhere. And they published my book, my kind of children's book called A King Without a Crown, when I was 9 years old. And, which, was the last thing I would publish for 30 years, 7 novels, 500 short stories. But so it's kind of an auspicious beginning to publishing. But she really made a writer out of me by just giving me the license to do it, just letting me be, just like this kid needs to be in a corner writing. We already taught him about dinosaurs and, the 5 continents, or however many continents there are. I think there's 5 right now. But whatever you learn in 3rd grade, I'd already kind of learned. So she just, and also in doing that, she achieved another thing, which was like, she allowed me not to just totally make anarchy out of her class, because I was climbing the rafters, I was a class clown, kind of desperately wanting attention. And I see my kid going through it too. He's kind of a clown. Oh man, they have you can't be a clown anymore, dude. They don't let you. Like in the 70s and 80s, even though I was a terrible student, I got D's and F's, I always felt seen. I felt like my teachers actually liked me, even though I was a shitty student. They're just like, he's kind of fun to have in my class. He does contribute. He says some funny stuff. School's just not his thing. Not anymore, dude. I just you got school administrators breathing down your neck when your kids start, if their grades start, it's just, I feel so bad for him. Cause he'll he'll just make some wisecracks in home ec or something like that. And I got to get a 7-paragraph email from his, home ec teacher. And one of the paragraphs is like, we have to be very careful how we talk about onions. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, my kid is not getting in trouble because he made a couple, he's probably feeling good about himself. He got a little social traction. Maybe he made a girl laugh, I just feel like it's all such serious business now. We just grew up in a better time. I feel bad saying it. I mean, it's just school's not how it was.
It seems like it was a simpler time. That's for sure. I mean, just like I'd leave my backyard and walk to my elementary school and walk home, no problems. It seemed like just like logistically so much easier in our childhood. Yeah,
and you could find your tribe. And now there's no tribes because they're so afraid of like bullying or whatever. There's like a real conformist vibe. I mean, no teasing, no clowning off. Business. And like, when I went to high school, you had the stoners hanging out in the parking lot. You had the jocks, you had the preppy kids. Everybody could at least kind of find their tribe. And now I go to his school and I once in a while I'll see like a goth kid and I'm going, well, I look at my kid and I'm like, Jesus Christ, he looks like a juvenile delinquent. Like he's got hair down to his ass and he's got some big combat boots. And he's kind of scary looking. And, I'm like, okay, good for him. You know what I mean? But all the rest of the kids are kind of wealthier kids and they wear these sweats and slides with socks on. And they're just big head of curly hair, just walking through life, driving a Lexus to school. And it's just, I don't know, dude. I feel bad for him.
Yeah. So, you talked about this teacher of yours who kind of gave you a pen and paper and put you in the corner and let you write. Did she ever get to see you have publishing success? Like, did you ever keep in touch with her?
And I never got to thank her either. But, every time I tell that story, it heartens other educators. You know what I mean? So she is her legacy, I mean, a lot of people know about Fran Hanford now that didn't. I mean, I always mention her. I wish that I could have, but it took me too damn long to have any success. You know what I mean? It took me till I was 39 years old. So I wish that I had been able to impart that to her because, I mean, just as I had said earlier about my neighbors, the Marshalls, a lot of people I feel like they really kind of just saved my life. We need angels.
Champions.
My life might have ended up a lot different. And I mean, the difference between me and, 24 of my friends that probably died of overdoses. And I don't even think that number is much of an exaggeration, at least a dozen, probably somewhere between a dozen and two. I mean, maybe one of the only things separating me between that fate was just having a couple angels in my life.
Did you ever get into, like, I'm assuming it was an opiate overdose that killed most of your friends, right? Was it opiates?
Yes. And I never, thank God I was a little skittish about needles because, I smoked it. I'd smoked the opiates for a while. I did get into like, when I was like 17, 18, I was ether basing coke, which is like just insane. Like I need that. I already sound like I've been ether basing coke before, all the time.
Right.
And, so luckily, but like I was living in, I was in telemarketing and I was running telemarketing rooms, these boiler room operations and like basically working with hookers and pimps and people who lived in drug addicts, people who lived in like weekly rate motels like the Cozy 8. And it was just a shady, really cool. I thought that was going to be what my first novel was this like Silicon Valley mid 80s, like the birth of telemarketing. I thought like by the time I was like 18, I was like, this is going to be what my first novel's about. I never wrote it. Maybe I will someday.
You were already thinking about it then at 18?
Yeah, I wrote my first novel when I was 18, but it wasn't that.
What was it?
It was, again, back to my friend Jason, who produces my podcast. Shout out to A Fresh Face in Hell. He went to jail when he was 18 for stealing a pack of cigarettes. And he came up with, in Grant County, which is like rural Washington, and he came up with the brilliant idea of representing himself. And so he thought he had formulated a pretty good argument, which was that I used to have a problem when I was like a teenager, but I've overcome this. And this is the first time it slipped up and the judge is like, cack. Like he should have never mentioned that, right? Because once you're a juvenile, once you turn 18, all that stuff disappears. But that allowed the judge to see the pattern. So he got 6 weeks or something like that in Grant County jail for stealing a pack of cigarettes. And so he was writing me missives and I was sending him books and stuff like that. And I guess it's a matter of distance. The stuff I was experiencing at that point, I didn't have enough distance to write about it. But so here I started sort of asking him questions in these letters about the jail dynamic. It's a very me book. And the idea was that I follow these inmates while they're and then I follow them one by one as they get sprung. But then at that point, the novel just delineated into obscurity. And by the end of it, it was about an 18-year-old guy trying to finish his first novel. I mean, the wheels fell off the cart, but I was 18 when I wrote that. And then I wrote another one. I was like 20. And I mean, I never stopped writing them.
Yeah. So we've talked about this, like you need to do this work as like a method of survival almost. Like it's just an essential part of your existence. I'm curious to know. And
I think I want to make one point about that. The other thing is that I feel like it makes me a more expansive person. It really does. It's my window into empathy. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like I'm a better husband. I feel like I'm a better dad. I feel like I'm a better friend. I feel like I'm a better human being because of this exercise in empathy that is writing, like going through fire with these people and literally walking another mile in their shoes. I have no doubt I've grown as a person because of that. And I don't think I would have. I think I was kind of when I was 16, 15, I was kind of one of those like white-haired boys, kind of like jaded, like prematurely jaded. I'm not that person at all. And I'm like open-hearted. I'll try anything. I try to help people. And all of that is just because of the work.
The reading and the writing.
Yeah. Mostly the writing, the reading too. They're kind of the same thing, but like the writing is just much more intense.
And so when you look back with the benefit of hindsight, and your debut novel was called All About Lulu, and that was the one that broke through, like after you had written several that didn't work.
More than several, but yeah.
What changed? Like was it just a gradual progression of getting better and better, or like was there like a sharper, like point of epiphany or breakthrough with All About Lulu that set you on your course?
Mostly improving, but then also in another way, just sort of becoming a little more aware of how it all worked, like best practices as far as trying to get published. Like I wrote a couple of good novels before, probably 3 good ones before All About Lulu, that I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I just sending unsolicited 400-page documents to the bottom of office buildings in New York with like a really pretentious cover letter. I didn't know I had to have an agent. I didn't know. I mean, dude, I was sending out stories to and I would get polite, rejection notices that would from like Black Warrior magazine that would be, may I ask you, are you African American? Or like, I mean, it would be, I'd be like just carpet bombing anything, I just go to the library. Oh, the writer's guide. And everybody from A to Z gets this story. And of course, not realizing that any editor can smell a carpet bomb from a mile away. So like I was not doing myself any favors. So it was a combination of just getting better at the craft, but then also understanding, I'm looking out for publishers I like. And I really like Soft Skull. I like this editor, Richard Nash. I love his editorial voice. Like this guy speaks my language. I think this guy would like, whereas before I would have just sent it everywhere. I'm like, I'm going to concentrate on this guy and I'm going to get my book to him. And sure enough, I found my champion that way. So part of it was putting the onus on myself to be a little more professional about trying to find a champion. And then part of it was just like getting better after doing it 6, 7 times, 8 times, whatever.
And now you're on kind of a book a year pace?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's just, there's no deadline to it. That's just about how long it takes me to metabolize a book. If I can stay on, I mean, you do the math. I mean, I write 40 hours a week. I mean, even if I get 2,000 words a week, which isn't really that productive, then you're still looking at, that's over 100,000 words a year. And 100,000 words is a longer novel.
Yeah. And it's mostly not, you've published only novels, right? Have you published a story collection or no?
No, I think I probably wrote enough stories. I published maybe 8 or 10 stories. I never considered myself much of a miniaturist. I like big shaggy things. And I find since I'm, everything's pretty much character driven, the more I can, expand on character and extrapolate, the more time I have with them, like the more that suits me. So I never thought my short stories were great.
So what are you working on now? You've got you said you just started a book a couple of weeks ago. So can you give us any hints, like broadly speaking, what you're getting into?
Sure. I'm calling it Wednesday Night Lights. It's about a grief counseling group that meets like on Wednesdays in the church basement or the South Tacoma Way, community center. And it's basically five characters who each are in basically in a different state of grief. One is I don't beat anybody over the head with that, but that's how I'm kind of framing the characters. One of them's in denial. One of them's angry. One of them's at the bargaining period. One of them's getting closer to acceptance. And so like the conceit of it is just, I go through each cycle of 5 characters' actions. We learn their trauma. We learn what their tragedy was, but then we get to see them in this group dynamic and kind of sort of measure where they are in a different way, in a different context. And I'll change the points of view on like who's reporting on each meeting, but they're these kind of reprises throughout the novel. So like it's the most me novel ever in a way, because the conceit of the structure is sort of married to the form. I'm loving it. It's really fun.
All right, man. You're a beast. I can't believe
I'm crazy, dude.
Yeah, it's working. It's working. I like it. It. And I congratulate you on The Heart of Winter. Is it Heart of Winter or The Heart of Winter?
The Heart of Winter.
The Heart of Winter.
You know Jarrett Middleton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That was his title.
He
was writing a hockey novel called The Heart of Winter, and I'm writing this book, and I'm like, he's kind of petered out on that because he got into producing stuff. And I'm like, I had to ask him. He hadn't written on it in about 2 years. And I'm like, dude, hey, can I have that title? Can I appropriate that title? Because it was just the perfect title for this novel. And they were like Abe and Ruth something else, Walters at first. But it was still the perfect title. And I'm like, once he said yeah on the title, I'm like, well, now they're going to be called Abe and Ruth Winter, right? I mean, it was just, and so to bring it fully around, Thomas Konstam, who you probably also know, who Supersonic, that was my title. So like Jarrett gave me his title. I guess sometimes it's a collaboration. And so you got to pay it forward. But I had to give Jarrett the hat tip for that, what I thought was the perfect title for the novel.
Well, it's always fun talking with you. Congratulations on this book and all that you have accomplished. And best of luck with the new one.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it always. And hopefully I see you next time I'm down in the Southland.
Okay, that is it. That was Jonathan Evison. What do you think about that? Great conversation with Mr. Evison. His new novel is called The Heart of Winter. It's out there now from Dutton. Go get your copy immediately. You can find Johnny on the web. I think he's got a website. Let's see, JonathanEvison.net. JonathanEvison.net, I think is what it is. And I believe he's on Facebook and X. Is that what you call it? The website formerly known as Twitter. So check it out. One more time, the book is called The Heart of Winter. All right? Don't forget to subscribe to this show. Remember to do that. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Bluesky and Instagram. Sign up for my Substack newsletter, bradlisti.substack.com. Join the Otherppl Patreon community if you want to support the work that I do. And if you want to get a book club subscription or an Otherppl t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you can do all of that at the show's official website, otherppl.com. Be sure to check out my new company launching later this year. It's called Deep Dive. The website landing page is www.deepdive.audio. Sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter and follow Deep Dive on Bluesky and Instagram to keep up with all the latest. If you have 2 minutes and you want to do me a favor and help the show out a little bit, please give this program a rating wherever you listen. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Rate it, review it. It helps the show in the algorithm, and it helps it find new listeners. Okay, so that does it for today. Coming up on Thursday, there should be, fingers crossed, a new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture. Mira, her grandmother is in ill health, so there's been some family stuff going on. She might have to deal with that. We just don't know. It's touch and go. But hopefully, Mira will be back for a new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture coming up on Thursday. Stay tuned.